Let's begin. They hear the first pops. Cuddled on the couch, they both sit straight up. Gunfire, he says. She knows who it is before she answers it. We heard it too, Mama. Everyone inside? Yes, needed to know you two are safe. I think it will all work out if we stay inside. Welcome. I'm Dessa Little, owner of Lucius Light, where Black women's stories ascend the horizon. This reading is a commemoration of the Centennial of the Nubian Barnstormer that spans the years between World War I and World War II. And Ava, the main character, her family and friends are residents of Greenwood. The race massacre is a pivotal moment in their lives. So what I want to do is go back to the beginning of these books, the first volume. For you. Let's see. The Nubian Barnstormer, Volume 1, Persistence. And the second one is called The Nubian Barnstormer, Volume 2, Crossroads. Anyway, of what Greenwood's residents, what their lives were like. And by the way, if you're not watching this live, you should be able to go to the description below. Novels. You can buy them on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and if you go to my website, which the link to that is on a list of Black-owned independent bookstores where you can also buy the books. Oh, and please subscribe to the channel and like the video. So let's continue. Is this excitement? Ava senses today will be significant. Is this excitement or anxiety? She wonders about the flutter in her stomach. About to begin her formal university, she will be her family's first college graduate. Her diploma is a course on study at the institution. But now that the end is near, she's found, I can't see myself in the classroom, she thinks. The sweltering August morning, typical of Tulsa, adds to her agitation. Her new peach taffeta dress provides some relief. 2 inches above her ankles, it's her first time wearing the latest fashion. No longer burdened by a petticoat and a floor-length skirt, her train ride will be more on the Frisco train platform. Her mother insists that short frocks are for the young. Though it's old-fashioned, she decides the dress her mother wears is practical but elegant, like Mama. Of the white people they pass on their way to their section of on their way to the colored section. The expressions range from disbelief to disdain. The only residents of Greenwood, she knows they consider well-dressed Negroes in the front. Again, typical of Tulsa. She glances behind her at her younger brothers. Andrew carries her satchel. Andrew is now taller than she is. She grins at the boys, who respond in kind. Once they reach the colored section, Papa hurries towards them holding hands with Aton, the youngest. Instead, she notices some tears welling in her mother's eyes. My brilliant, beautiful baby is leaving me again, Mama says as she caresses Ava's face. Mama. Glad to see you. You are pretty, Mama. She's funny looking, Andrew pipes in. This earns him a shove from his sister, which he returns, until his voice trails off. Suddenly, Ava follows his gaze to a white couple glaring from across their section, saying, suddenly, a noise similar to a sputtering automobile engine approaches overhead. All eyes peer at the sky as it grows louder. Ava recognizes it instantly. An airplane. She has seen sketches of aircraft with news stories about Negro aviators in the Tulsa Crescent, the Oklahoma Providence, The drawings do not compare, she thinks. I've never seen anything more beautiful. The train to Chandler, the first leg of her journey to Langston, arrives. Her parents the Jim Crow car. She takes a seat by the window so she can goodbye to her friend departs. Then a thought pops in her head. I want to fly an airplane. Astonished, she leans back in her seat. Mustn't strain that new dress. Mustn't stain the dress, she thinks. She surveys the car. Most of its occupants are also dressed in their finery. The best seats men sit on wooden benches. All must place their feet on a grimy floor that hasn't been cleaned since the car transported livestock, at least. It smells clean today, fortifies her. I will fly, Ava chants quietly as Tulsa fades from view. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about Greenwood. Prior to the race massacre, about 9,000 people called it home. 30 square blocks, the residential section. And there was also a section that they called Deep Greenwood, which was the commercial section. And that had over 250 businesses. Everything from luxury hotels to movie theaters to doctor's offices. And lawyers, accountants also had offices there. There were 2 daily newspapers. It had its own post office. And even 6 residents owned their own airplanes. That little fact was what inspired me to have Ava desire to become an aviator. Now, let's get back to the chapter that I simply call May 31st through June 1st, 1921. Thank you to everyone who's here. And I will get back to They hear more shooting as the night wears on. When they start to smell smoke, they know that the source may not be in Greenwood, but is very close. Ava tries to call Mama, but the lines are busy. As the shooting intensifies, Carl determines they should cut off all the lights and close their curtains. He goes to each house on their side of the street to give their neighbors, including Mama and Papa, the same advice. Ava peeks through the curtains of their parlor window, watching until she sees Carl return safely to the entryway. She hurries to the front door and lets him in. How is everyone? All are well. Dr. Collins had some news. They sit on the couch and hold hands. When our men got to the courthouse, the mob had grown even larger, some with their own guns. A sheriff's deputy demanded that Mr. Bailey and the rest from Greenwood give up their weapons. They refused because the whites weren't asked to do the same. One of the armed white men took offense to Bailey's objection, and they scuffled. One of their guns went off and accidentally shot Diamond. Good Lord. Skirmishes broke out. Last anyone saw, the whites weren't letting the ambulance get to him. It looked bad. Poor Diamond. How are the others? Collins hadn't heard. There's a gun battle across the Frisco tracks. Some men have taken to the taller buildings and towers around Greenwood to shoot at any white invaders. So Dr. Collins told you that? Does he know anything about the fires? One was an attempt to smoke out the shooters from a building near the station. The other was a colored woman's house in the white section right outside of Deep Greenwood. The other was a colored woman's house in a white section right outside of Deep Greenwood. Must be Mrs. Mercer. I saw her once when I was a child, but I hear people talk about her. Does he know how she is? She managed to escape and is staying with friends here. White stopped the fire department from putting it out, but the firemen distracted the mob so she could escape. They sit in silence until Ava breaks it. This is terrifying. Carl puts his arm around her, and they settle on the couch. So, I guess you figured out by now that I did a lot of research for these books. This is historical fiction, but the historical is very important. What I did was use a preponderance of concurrent news items, very accurate research that was done later, even testimonies of some of the survivors of Greenwood. So I wanted the events to all be very accurate. Also, as a matter of respect, instead of using people's real names, I used fictionalized ones. Because for one thing, there's no way to know what the personalities and thoughts were of the people who were alive. I wanted to create characters that would help move my story along. So, and just to give you an example, the real gentleman who was involved, whose arrest, whose the Tulsa newspapers wanted to say that he needed to be lynched. His real name was Roland. In my books, I call him Mr. Chester. So, let's continue. The gunfire has ceased, and Carl has convinced his wife to get some sleep. Ava! Carl's harsh whisper, along with his shaking her shoulder, wakes her. What's wrong? She asks. She starts to reach for the lamp on the bedside table, but he gently grabs and holds onto her hand. No, get dressed quickly and pack anything we need. Why? They're setting up artillery on men in artillery. Dress and pack what you can as quickly as possible. I'm not sure what they plan to do, but I don't want us here to find out. He stands. I'm going out back to alert the neighbors, to your parents to tell them I'm driving out of here. He rushes out of the room. It all seems unreal. She dresses, grabs 2 pieces of luggage, one for each of them. She throws in clothes and undergarments. She adds an additional her other important jewelry, her wedding band, engagement ring, and the airplane necklace she's already wearing. Next, she goes to the closet in the next bedroom, removes the floorboard, her mother's example. She begins with $500, adding any extra cash she accumulated. Now it contains almost 2,000. She runs downstairs with both bags. In the cabinet, she pulls out Carl's discharge papers, bank account registers, mortgage papers, insurance policies, their wedding album, and the family Bible, a wedding gift from Reverend Griffin. Closing both the home she's shared with the love of her life. I will never see this place again, she thinks. Her certainty frightens her. Carl enters through the back door and walks through the kitchen to get to her. Are we ready? He grabs hers. It'll be easier. They leave the house. It's dark. The only light provided by the 3/4 moon. Ava makes a point of not facing Standpipe Hill in case they, whoever they and Carl put the bags in the back seat and get in the auto. They watch Mama and Papa and the boys get into the Dodge. Andrew gets in on the driver's side. Ava peers at Carl with the question in her eyes. We're driving without headlights. Andrew can see better and drive, Papa does. To her surprise, they turn the autos around and head south. Then she realizes if they went straight north, they'd be right in the sights of the Standpipe. Ahead, they see white men in uniforms crossing North Greenwood Avenue. Damn, National Guard, Carl says. Andrew, who had been following, pulls ahead and makes a sharp left onto Frankfurt Avenue. Carl follows him. You think, my little brother is going to leave us out of here, she thinks. As they continue north on Frankfurt, she says, since we're going this way, maybe we can see if CL is too dangerous to take any side trips, even for a friend, about someone who's more than an employee. Next, Andrew makes a right onto King Street. They cross Greenwood Avenue, the National Guard now south of them. She catches a glimpse of guardsmen holding guns on colored men, breathes freely. They're heading north, out of Greenwood. They must be trying to leave town on foot, she says. Andrew slows down and stops as the mass grows larger. We need to keep moving, a frustrated Carl declares. They're letting 2 women in, Mrs. Bentley and their daughter Sandra. Carl, pull ahead. That's Miss Pierce and Mr. Howard. When he does, they find Miss Pierce and Mr. Howard wearing their nightclothes and slippers. Get in, Ava yells. The couple, stunned to see them, get in the back seat. Ava, child. Miss Pierce reaches over to hug her. You walked all the way up here, Ava asks. Miss Pierce starts to cry, something Ava has never seen before. Mr. Howard puts his arm around his wife so she can rest against him. We ran. A lot farther than I thought these old bones could carry me, Mr. Howard answers. So, just a reminder as I take a little break here. If you haven't, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button for this video. And also, if you go to the About page, you'll see the links to the website, Lucia's Light, and all of my social media. And if you can join those, like those too, I really would appreciate it. So now we are going to continue where Ava and her family are now, they've escaped, and they're at the family farm in Langston. She cuddles a sleeping Baker on the couch. She stares at the clock in the parlor, wondering when those who went to town will return. She hears Josie is her cousin, and they're about the same age, pull up to the front of the house, followed by familiar footsteps climbing onto the porch. They move slower than normal. When they enter, instead of seeing the grief she expects, her parents and Josie appear stunned. Uncle Solomon's angry. What now? Ava whispers. She carefully lays Baker on the couch. Mama sits beside her. Papa drops into the nearest chair. Uncle Solomon paces back and forth in a furor. Josie stands in front of her. I met a man at the general store. He snuck on a freight car in from Greenwood. And Pearl, Carrie, and Carl enter from the kitchen, about to greet everyone. When she sees their expressions, Aunt Pearl asks, what else done happened? It's gone, Papa says. What's gone? Aunt Pearl asks. Bastards done burned it to the ground, Uncle Solomon yells, so loud that he wakes Baker, who starts crying. Carrie rushes to her youngest and cradles him. He say right after sunrise yesterday, white people come from Tulsa and burned Greenwood down. Only building left standing is that Smith Hotel, 'cause a white man done own it, Josie spills out. I can't believe it, Ava says. She notices Josie and Uncle Solomon exchanging glances. What else? The man say they dropped bombs, Josie begins. Bombs? Carl asks. From airplanes. Josie looks directly at Ava. He say they was yours. He seen your show, saw your name on them. She hears nothing more. She runs from the house through the front yard. Unsteady, she stumbles and falls. She pounds the ground with her fist. Carl tries to pull her backwards and stop her. Finally, he spins her around so they're face to face. My airplanes. They used my airplanes. So, as you can see, the first book ends on the sad note of the massacre. However, just like the real Greenwood, it does rise again. And the same happens for my characters. And that story starts with the Nubian Barnstormer, Volume 2, Crossroads. Again, as I said, the books cover from World War I through World War II. So again, like I said, Greenwood does rise from the ashes. So let me read a little bit about that from the second novel. Ava walks up the marble stairs of the Oklahoma State Capitol with little Andy in her arms. Usually, 14-month-old Andrew Samuel Hemmel would loudly protest not being able to climb them himself. So much like my brother, she recognizes. But her wide-eyed son quietly surveys his surroundings as if he senses the importance of the occasion. This is her first time in Oklahoma City, though it's close to Langston. She's heard stories about Negroes being lynched here as a child, so she held no desire to visit. Her companions make this sojourn bearable. On her right, Papa talks to Mama, who grins at Andy, Kathy Ann. And Kathy Ann is a great friend of hers and a world-renowned journalist. Kathy Ann, notepad and pencil in hand, is on Ava's left. Bob Lasley, whose Tulsa Crescent burned to the ground of his own article. Kathy Jr., Aton, Otto Jr., and Artest bring up the rear. Since photography is not allowed inside, Whitty waits outdoors. They walk down halls lined with portraits of former justices. Once they enter the courtroom, she observes, "We can share these mahogany benches with whites in here, but we're banned from sitting with them in every other part of this city. My husband is about to argue for justice in such a place." She removes Andy's cap and places it on her lap. As the court officers prepare for the proceedings, her mind wanders to when she and Carl decided to return to Greenwood. The first legal rulings that occur. Let me start a little earlier. A few days after the riot, the Tulsa City Commission is formed to investigate what happened. In the meantime, both Mr. Danny and Mr. Gregg post bail and leave town. The first legal ruling that occurred charges against Mr. Danny, Mr. Gregg, and Mr. Chester, the man whose arrest started the trouble. Also, they get word that the people released from the internment camps who decided to say they plan to rebuild. After much discussion, Carl, Papa, Uncle Solomon, Josie, and Artest decide to go and see for themselves. When they come back a few stomach, which is starting to poke out a little. "We found CL and Miranda," he begins. Her eyes tear up at the mention of her friends. "Thank God. How are they?" "They're well, considering that the story of her consumption." He does inform her that Mr. Franklin, Miranda's father, is among the dead. Every survivor's bravery is inspiring. Some have approached me about filing a house. No one should have to live in a tent. I believe I can make a stand for our community, that we can make a stand. I have no doubt. His head. Ava follows his gaze to the plaintiff's table in the well before the justice's bench. Carl, Foster, and Mr. James stand there. "Yes, little man, there's Daddy," she whispers. Carl is appealing a ruling against his lawsuit to strike down a Tulsa fire ordinance enacted designed to stop Negroes from owning business, gaining self-sufficiency. And just a little bit about Tulsa's reactive massacre. So even actually at the time of the massacre, to Australia, to Canada, and newspapers in this country, everywhere from Connecticut to New Mexico, covered it. So in later years, didn't have a chance. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So what was? There was a Tulsa City Commission in 1921 that I referred to in the book that was true, and their rulings were like that. However, when it came to the insurance cases, they decided that even though they apologized profusely during their hearings, they decided that the Negroes of Greenwood started those troubles so that their damages were self-inflicted. Because of that, the insurance companies decided not to pay out anything. And also there was a Reconstruction Commission set up by Tulsa that was supposed to help the survivors. And because, like I said, there was worldwide and national coverage, people from all over the world sent furniture, clothing, bedding, food to help the survivors. And this Reconstruction Commission refused all of it. Still, there were Negro civic groups in the country who managed to um, get help to the survivors. And the newspapers that I said, the Tulsa newspapers that urged having Mr. Rowland lynched to get justice, um, their archives, they got rid of all the different articles that they wrote, urging the white citizens to do that. So, with them getting rid of their articles in Oklahoma, I also erasing any knowledge of it, this is why the Greenwood Massacre was erased from history, basically. Now I'm going to go back to the hearing is over in less than 2 hours. The observers from Langston wait outside on the Capitol stairs. Brilliant arguments on Carl's part, Kathy Ann says to Ava. Though his earlier arguments against the insurance companies were brilliant also, and he lost. True, Ava agrees. She still holds Andy, who has reached under her dress collar to pull out the airplane necklace. But he knew the commission's finding meant he had an uphill battle with the insurance cases. He believes he stands a better chance with this one. Greenwood's economic future depends on it, Kathy Ann says. She smiles at Andy playing with the charm. Otto Jr. and Kathy Jr. broke my necklaces when I held them as babies. Andy treats your jewelry with reverential care. Ava kisses his forehead. Airplane, he says, showing the charm to the women. His grin displaying his baby teeth makes them chuckle. Yes, airplane, Ava responds. Kathy Ann takes a moment to examine her friend. Do you miss flying? You're the first person to ask, as if it's a foregone conclusion I will never fly again. Should I conclude from your answer that's not the case? That's my conundrum. We only have what remains of the cash I kept at home prior to the riot. Carl got little work while we were in Ames. All the cases have been done pro bono. We live off of what we have. There's no money to spare. You know Otto would be glad. You both have been already far too generous to me. Your aid to Greenwood is of greater importance. If I decide to resume my show, I'll find a way to finance it myself. Carl, Foster, and Mr. James emerge from the building. Kathy Ann asks them questions about the proceedings. Ava winks at Andy, hoping to rid herself of the melancholy that has suddenly befallen her. On to more important things, she thinks. Oh, and by the way, if you know the historian John Hope Franklin, his father, B.C. Franklin, was one of the lawyers who fought for Greenwood. They are Greenwood natives, and B.C. Franklin was one of the lawyers that fought for Greenwood after the massacre. And he won this final appeal, as Carl will do in my book. So, to continue, Carl wins the appeal, which is fortunate. Some businesses had defiantly started rebuilding in Deep Greenwood. A rumor circulated that Tulsa businessmen wanted to turn it, North Detroit Avenue, into an industrial and warehouse district for themselves. The effect would have been twofold: white expansion north of the Frisco tracks, and the end of any type of Negro self-determination in Tulsa. But the Oklahoma Supreme Court's decision thwarts those plans. New buildings rise in the business district north of Greenwood Business District, with North Greenwood Avenue still the main strip. Papa and Carl share a building on the plot Papa still owns. James and Hemmer, Carl's law firm, occupies the third floor. Odell Accountancy, Papa's business, the second. They leave the street level vacant for a potential renter, and our test now works for Papa. office. National headquarters suggest that he work in Tulsa until it's done. Though Tulsa's postmaster vouched for him to secure his release from internment, they agree that isn't a good idea. Even if he's out of public view, the white employees would take offense. Mr. Florida, former caterer at the Danny, gets investors to build his new hotel. Rumor has it that Mr. Danny, who has disappeared, is secretly backing the deal. Mr. Florida denies this. Mr. Smith's hotel, though it was spared from arson, suffered smoke and structural damage. And he's the white man whose hotel was not burned, he, too, is denied insurance compensation, the same as the colored businessmen and women of Greenwood. His lawsuit and appeal both fail. He tears down the building and resumes business elsewhere. Mr. Bentley reopens his store. Miss Pierce opens a larger little cafe, and Mr. Howard is glad Western Union wastes no time rebuilding its Greenwood office. Before we turn not in the business district, Greenwood Baptist Church. Reverend Griffin had been at the fairgrounds after the riot. People who worked for white Tulsans, mostly domestics, were released. Pastor Davis of the White Tulsa Anglican Church took it upon himself to search for his friend and had Reverend Griffin freed. They concocted a scheme in which Pastor Davis went to all the Ciel and Miranda were among those he freed. In addition, the pastor offered Reverend Griffin a room in the Davis home where he could live indefinitely. But Reverend Griffin chose to stay among those living in the tent. Did a whole heck of a lot of work in that. This story were determined that if directed, it would be Greenwood Baptist. So, and I thank you. These books, Amazon, who are carrying the book. Later again, this will be shown on the channel. Thank you all for being here in my first live stream. This is really cool. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.